All right, great. Usually that happens right as I start, so I waited this time. Hi and welcome, everyone. It's so great to see so many faces that we recognize and some new faces. My name is Maria Carnamola. I'm the Executive Director at Gathering Ground. I'm a white woman with brown hair that is down today. I'm wearing reading glasses and a navy blue top, and if you can see, I'm wearing a necklace with a charm of Sicily, which is the Mediterranean warm island that I come from. On behalf of my entire team, I want to welcome you to today's briefing, Worker Self-Directed Nonprofits, a conversation with the Sustainable Economies Law Center. Today's briefing is made possible with the support of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the Stone Foundation of New Jersey, and the Grunin Foundation. If this is the first time you're joining us, welcome. We're delighted to have you with us, and we hope that this is the first of many programs that you participate in. We will be recording today's session, and it will be made available on YouTube. So if you miss any sections or you want to share it with friends, you can direct them to our YouTube channel. It will be an interactive conversation, so we'll be taking questions throughout. If you have a question that you don't feel comfortable asking directly, you can direct message myself, Anaya, or Maria, and we'll ask the question for you. Any discussion of and in New Jersey cannot begin without consideration of land and labor. Land and labor acknowledgements are tangible political admissions of the ongoing violence of the settler colonial state and our own implicit participation in it. Excuse me. We at Gathering Ground reside on unceded territory of the Lenni Lenape and acknowledge the global territories of Indigenous peoples stolen through the act of colonization and repeated violence. We encourage each one of you to acknowledge the Indigenous people of the land you're currently residing on and or where you come from, and invite you to add that today into the chat. You can learn about the original caretakers of the land in which you reside by looking it up in the link shared in the chat now. And so, Casey, if anyone adds something in, please share that out loud, and I'll move to our labor acknowledgement. We also must acknowledge that much of the wealth, infrastructure, and culture of this country, historically and throughout present day, is only possible because of generations of enslaved peoples, primarily those of African descent. That enslavement continues today in the carceral system and others. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Brenda. For us at Gathering Ground, we read these statements to make visible what has been invisible to many people, particularly people racialized as white. We acknowledge these historical truths of the theft of people and land, enslavement, forced migration, and forced labor. And this is only the first step. We encourage everyone to support the organizations and people, most of whom are people of color, some of you are in this room today, who have carried the weight of advancing racial justice and social change. Before I turn it over to our incredible guest speakers today, I want to tell you a little bit about Gathering Ground. Gathering Ground creates irresistible, justice-centered gatherings that ignite dialogue, learning, action, and collaboration in solidarity with all people and in service to the creation of a fair and just world. Gathering Ground offers a variety of programs designed to address systemic issues and empower individuals to become agents of positive change. From community engagement initiatives to collaborative learning experiences like our briefing today, each program is developed and crafted with the needs of our community in mind and with the overarching goal of cultivating a culture of equity and justice. I'm going to take really a small amount of time to tell you about the incredible programming we have coming up, and in the hopes that I can get you excited enough to register today. Our next briefing is on February 26th, same time, Thursdays, 2:30 to 4, with the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. We'll be talking about the reparations report, the nowness of reparations for Black people in New Jersey. And we'll be joined by Jean-Pierre Brutus and Asada Man Cologne from the Institute. So we hope you register for that exciting briefing. And on February 10th and 11th, we're bringing back, by popular request, Whitney Parnell of Service Never Sleeps for a two-part workshop on allyship. Space is limited, so please register as soon as possible. Make sure you tell your friends, your coworkers, your neighbors, your family, because it is an incredible opportunity to learn, especially now more than ever, how we can practice and strengthen our allies, our skills as allies. I also want to remind folks that we do have an Elevating Equity reading and discussion group. We meet every 4 to 6 weeks. Right now, we're reading the Nowness of Reparations report. It's really an exciting, energizing space. We usually meet for about an hour and we always go over because we just get so excited in that group. So if you're interested and want to join, please email myself or Casey. We'd love to have you with us. And lastly, in February, we'll kick off the month of February, the way we kick off every month with our Sipping in Solidarity, which is a community space to simply be together, connect, and be in harmony with one another. So we hope you join for all or some or any. We'd love to have you there. And just very quickly, I want to acknowledge the team that has made today's briefing possible. Casey O'Brien, our Director of Programming, Anaya Brown, our Communications Associate, Alyssa Prevost, our Operations Associate, who's not here with us today, and our newest team member, I'm so excited to introduce you all to Maria Espinal Mena, who is our Community Engagement Coordinator. I want to thank you all for making time in your busy days to be here with us today. I'm so excited to bring Sue Bennett and Erika Sato of the Sustainable Economies Law Center. I've been following their work for a long time, and I'm so excited to get this conversation going. So I will turn it over to Sue and Erika now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. We're so glad to be here. I'm calling in from Lisjan, which is the occupied unceded lands of the Ohlone peoples, also known as Oakland, California. And I'll let Erika introduce herself first.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Erika Sato. I live in Huchun in Berkeley, California on Ohlone land. Um, I'm a staff attorney at the Law Center and I work with land stewardship clients, some indigenous groups, and I also do a lot of our internal work at the Law Center around admin, financial, as well as like conflict engagement and some of those more fuzzy internal things. Um, and I appreciate the modeling of our physical descriptions from Maria. So I'm a mixed race, East Asian and white, gender non-conforming woman. And I'm wearing a brown long sleeve shirt and headphones.
Thanks, Erika. My name's Sue Bennett, and one of the cool things we do here at the Law Center is we choose our own titles. My title is the Director of Operations and Miscellaneous Stuff. So yeah, I do a lot of miscellaneous stuff along with Erika. I am a white lesbian with short gray hair. I am from working class roots. My intention is to move with compassion, kindness, and balance through today and every day. I've spent the last 40 years working in nonprofits. And so, with any luck, I'm in the late stage of my working for money life. I highly recommend, Vicki, we all have to have a lot of miscellaneous stuff to our title. I'm watching the chat here a little bit. I've held both programmatic and operational roles in nonprofit organizations, and I've always strived for less separation between those different types of work, and that those functions create silos sometimes in our orgs, and I've always wanted to break those down, and worker self-direction has been the most active way that I've seen that happen. My activist roots are from queer, feminist, and anti-racist collectivist movements. I've been at the Law Center for about 9 years, and I do see worker self-direction as the culmination of my activist work. It's the first time I've got to meld my participation in collective spaces with my paid work, and I didn't really know the two could come together until I discovered the Law Center. I love introducing others to these concepts that allow work and deeply democratic processes in order to empower people to create orgs that are dynamic and resilient. And so we'll talk a little. So those of you who aren't familiar with the Law Center, we exist to bridge the gap in legal expertise needed to transition from destructive economic systems to innovative and cooperative alternatives. As we have moved more into worker self-directed support for other orgs, but we also are very active in the worker co-op movement nationally and in land back and housing justice organizations, both here in California and elsewhere. So I'm going to just start today with some of the main benefits and challenges of worker self-direction. So we see the main balances, some of the best things that we can get out of worker self-direction is that we get to influence our own work and our own job titles. But yeah, really, we aren't tied to one specific role within the organization. Obviously, we're all hired on for certain things. The organization needs certain activities from all of us, but we highly expect everybody's interests and skills to sort of move around the organization. So you don't have to stay in one department or one role your whole time here. And we think this makes our organization more responsive, more interesting to work at, surely, but also allows for a lot more cross-training and understanding of the work that our coworkers are doing. Also allows for collective care. So we have a lot of HR policies and structures, meeting structures, the ways that we are together that prioritize collective care. And we really do feel like this is a space where we're unlearning hierarchies and that we can take that knowledge out into our communities and into our city, state, and federal governments. And many of you have heard the quote from Adrienne Marie Brown about working at the speed of trust, moving at the speed of trust. So not trying to get things done in this sense of urgency that many nonprofits work in. Certainly there is urgent work that many of us are participating in, but most of the things that or some of the things that we are faced with in our day-to-day activities are not as urgent as they sometimes first appear. And so prioritizing that trust. And so I've identified two crucial things that are necessary to work in a more democratic and supportive environment. And that is to be clear about how decisions get made and how we pay ourselves. We want to create a workplace where all workers have the influence the programs in which they work, the conditions of their workplace, and their own career paths. I had a executive director once that said, "I'm getting you ready for your next job, whether it's here within our organization or somewhere else in the sector." So we think of that, although many of us stay at the Law Center for a long time. I'm a 9-year employee. Erika was a fellow prior to being on staff, so we stick around. But we also want to really feel like you're supported to grow in within the organization and within the movement. So in order to have that that distribution of power and distribution of governance, we're really clear that you have to have structures that support that. Next slide, Erika. And so some of you are familiar with the idea of the tyranny of structurelessness, came from the feminist movement in the 70s. And we are very attuned to that, right? All of us have been in collectives or tried to use consensus to no end. I was going to say to not good end, but to no end. And so maybe you've been in a meeting like this, or you felt like this person. Click, Erika. And so we say, beware of the tyranny of the structurelessness Rex, right? Because what happens is when we're in a circle like this and it's going on, the loudest voice wins, right? And they jump in and say, this is what we should do. So we're not advocating for structurelessness. We want very clear structures about how decisions get made. And it's crucial that we have them. Otherwise, the power is still in those voices that are least marginalized and feel most comfortable speaking. And so we talk about a concept called polycentricity, which means there's many centers of power. So we're used to the typical org chart where the ED or the board or the ED are at the top, and then senior managers, maybe middle managers, depending on size, but then frontline staff are way there down there at the bottom, right? And what we find with that is that the people who are making the decisions are not as influenced by the decisions, right? And both in terms of staff and maybe even in terms of clients or the folks that we're working for, right? So the idea, our ideas around polycentricity involve circles, and individuals work in multiple circles. So I'm a member of the admin circle, a member of the finance circle, a member of our internal resilience circle, which is kind of the folks that are charged with making sure worker self-direction is working and that the staff is happy and resilient. I'm also a part of the worker self-directed nonprofit circle. That's what we're operating from today. So that's a program circle that provides services and education to others. I'm also part of the fellowship circle, which runs a program to support lawyers around the country who also want to work in deeply democratic or worker co-op or land back spaces. So it's crucial to us that everyone works in both program circles and operation circles. So for me, I'm mostly in operation circle. I spend probably 70% of my time doing admin work and finance work. But the other 30%, I'm working in these program circles. So it's a way that we've broken down that separation between admin staff and program staff, because I've seen that in organizations where that becomes a different kind of power, right? Some organizations, it's very top down, and the finance staff, the grants writers, the ED have all the power, and the decisions get passed down to the folks executing programs. Or it can be the other way, where there's some real rock star performers that are out in front and center, talking at big organizations, doing a lot of program work that's really sexy and cool and getting a lot of the limelight. And so then those providers or those workers are dictating to the admin staff how things should be, right? So either way, whoever's sort of holding that unidentified power, it creates a separation within the organization. And this is a way where we all are sharing those different kind of roles. And it really helps to understand the work that everybody's doing, because I've been in a lot of organizations where I have no idea what an admin folk are working on, and they have no idea what kind of services we're actually providing. So that's just some of the ideas about how we govern ourselves and how we make decisions. So I have a couple questions that I'd love you to ponder, and feel free to come off mute. Um, if you want to write into the chat, we'd love to hear, how are decisions made currently in your organization? How would you say you make decisions? And what are you doing to ensure that all voices are heard in decisions, or are you? And have you thought about, are these the right people to make the decision? So, or any other questions you might have about what I just shared. Feel free to unmute, type into the chat. Tell me a little bit about how you're doing it now.
Yeah, Shakira, go ahead.
Hi, so I'm independent now. It's been a long time since I've been working in an organization, so I mean, you know, the decisions were made by the chief executive and his senior team, basically. And so the decisions kind of filtered down to the ground level. But I did have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
So, one, and this may be something you'll talk about later, or maybe not at all, but I'm curious about the difference between worker self-directed organizations and worker-owned organizations.
Yeah,
That's yeah.
that's
So
a
that
good
was one
question.
question. Yeah, the other question is, I was wondering if worker self-directed organizations is a trend, because you mentioned supporting an organization of lawyers that are working with within these kinds of environments, and I was wondering, is this a growing trend?
I would say to the second question, yes. We had several years of sort of educating others and educating educating funders about running our organizations in this different way. So I would say it's a trend. Um, we like to say that, I like to say worker self-directed nonprofits are, if you had a 501c3 and a worker co-op and they had a baby. Okay. So we've taken a lot of what we do from what we've learned helping worker co-ops. So those are what we'd call worker owned, right? For-profit organizations. And this is applying those same principles, one voice, one vote, that kind of idea that's come out of the worker co-op movement into nonprofit organizations, right? Because we're not going to change our corporate structure. We all know that we want to be able to apply for grants. We are already 501c3s, but we want to be able to run in this more liberatory and democratic way. So thank you for that. Any other questions, thoughts, reactions?
Yeah, so we've got a bunch of folks that are starting to drop stuff into the chat. And so there's a couple of them, while ultimate decisions are top down, buy-in from workers is sometimes solicited during the early stages, is what one person said. Another says a lot of decisions are made with input from the small team. Some are concentrated at the top of the org or approved or vetoed at the top. Another says we have a small team, so there's a lot of input with final decisions made at the top. And then, I can certainly say for Gathering Ground, when Maria Carnamola joined the team as our executive director, she brought experience working in a much more horizontal organization. And so I have witnessed personally, conversations around policies and procedures, maybe things around HR, her actually bringing that for full discussion with our entire team. We're a small organization as well, but even so, that's something that was new for our structure as well. And we've got some other folks here. Yeah, so small teams, one says we're a small team of 3, therefore there is more ownership and decision-making as a group or a team than I've experienced at larger organizations, I think to the point you raised, Sue. And And then Erika is dropping in some resources into the chat as well. So that's kind of, we're seeing a lot of, yeah, there's conversation. A lot of the final decisions get made at the top, unless you're a really small team, in which case the work necessitates more of a co-equal conversation.
Yeah, and I think that takes us to our next slide, Erika, that it does seem more natural at a small scale, right? But it can be done at a larger scale. The Law Center is now at about 16 people, is that right, Erika? And I think we started out as a much smaller team, but we set up these structures even with a small team, right? Because what can happen with those is that team at the top can still be, they can think they're taking input, but they're really still holding all of the decision-making power, right? And that can be even more, that can disenfranchise people even more when they think they've given input, but it hasn't really, don't really understand how that input affects the decision, right? So I would say be really careful with that idea that, oh, we're taking input, but we're still making the decision. Unless you're super transparent about how that input was used, it can actually make people feel worse. Like, why did I bother, right? We've all been in that kind of a situation. Erika, can you share the slide? Oh, you did. Okay, sorry.
Wait,
I
which
just
slide?
my meeting. No, yeah, that's good. My meeting view got messed up there. I guess you can toggle between faces and screen. So some of the ways that we can allow for those views and approaches to be more plural is that the decision is made by the people doing or the most affected by the work. Okay, and so that means if the decision only affects the worker co-op team, the worker co-op team makes that decision, and the rest of us don't really have say. We can have input, we can respond to something that they've posted that they're making a decision about. But really, if I'm not a member of that circle, I don't get to say. So nobody with any title has more power than the individuals in that particular circle. And then the other axiom that we really rely on are that decisions are adaptable. We'll make a decision that we're maybe at so we have the smaller circles make decisions based on their needs and programming. And then we have a larger circle we call the general circle that makes decisions for the whole organization. So right now we're struggling with finding a new office space. Well, that's going to affect everybody in the organization. So that we have small teams working on the finding the office, figuring out how we're going to move, when do we give notice to our current landlords, all that kind of stuff is done at a small team level. But the ultimate decision about moving and where to move and how much to spend, that's made by the whole organization, the general circle. So the smaller decisions or decisions that affect just some people can be made at a smaller group level. And that can be nested circles nested within each other, depending on how large the organization is. Lest you think this can't be done in larger organizations, there's healthcare teams of I think it's a few thousand people that are operating in this way, but that the local service team of nurses and social worker are considered an individual circle and make decisions for themselves, right? So, and then the larger the effect of the decision is, the larger the group process has to be. But that idea of adaptability is sometimes decisions are short term, like we're not sure about this, let's try it for 6 months. And we also are clear that anybody can bring a different idea. So we don't block a decision just because we think there might be a better idea, as long as it won't harm the organization. If we do think there's a better idea, we can then bring another proposal to try a different thing. So when you bring a proposal to do something, you're obligated to gather and incorporate the feedback from the rest of the team. We call this consent-based decision making, and it allows the decision to move forward without everybody being in consensus. So again, that in order to withhold your consent, you have to believe that this decision will harm the organization. And so that's a little different threshold. It might seem subtle, but it's not, because we've all been tied down to a consensus situation where you have to feel like you have to convince everyone. This is more, you have to have a reasoned or principled objection to a decision. And then I have one more slide, and it's mostly just about, again, what the value of this circle structure is, just to remind. I love this. Did you draw that one, Erika? That's a great graphic. But
Thank you. Yeah.
So it enables a high degree of autonomous and yet accountable action. Okay, so circles can make their own decisions about their own programs or operations, but they're accountable to the larger organization. And then again, the reasoned hierarchy. So this is, we call it a hierarchy of roles, not a hierarchy of people. So depending on my role in a circle, I might be able to be told what to do by somebody else to get a job done, but that's not our positionality within the organization throughout all of history, right? So we consider ourselves a completely flat structure. And then that accountability with the shared power, with great rights comes great responsibility. And we totally see that. We all see ourselves as stewards of this organization, and that we are very much invested in the growth and the safety and the effectiveness of the whole organization, as well as our own personal program interests, our own personal interests. So balancing those at all times. So I think that's about it from this part of the ideas around decision making and structure. And now Erika's going to take over and talk about salaries.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, I was just thinking about how that kind of sets us up nicely because salaries, I would say our wage structure is kind of one of the biggest decisions that organizations need to make and can be really challenging because it feels kind of high stakes and brings up a lot for people. But it's actually a good example of the kinds of results that you can get when you have collective decision-making processes, like Sue is talking about. All right, so I'm going to ask you guys a couple of questions on the next slide. So before I do that, I'll just name, here are kind of some different values and considerations that might or might not go into your compensation structure. And this is kind of the first thing we recommend that you do when you're thinking about your compensation scheme, is just taking stock of like, what are the values reflected in your current compensation scheme? What are the values that you want to be reflected in it? So some things that we thought of are need versus merit. Do you want to pay people based on what you think they need or what you think they deserve? Seniority and responsibility within the organization is something that a lot of organizations consider. Equity versus equality. This is kind of getting deeper into the need niche and foreshadowing what our structure is, but because we have sort of people's life circumstances are accounted for in their salary structure. Cost of living in different places. cost of dependent care for people who have dependents, space for emergency expenses. If your organization kind of has a stance on retirement savings and home ownership, do you think that your employees should be able to do that on their salaries? Trade-offs, like, there's only a limited amount of money to go around, so does everybody get a raise or do you hire another person? Solidarity with the working class or the community of people that you work with, versus kind of becoming part of the professional class if you pay yourself more. Individual self-assessment of need, and then market rates, or kind of what do we need to pay people to be incentivized to work here, or what other incentives do we have other than pay? Okay, so again, we're going to ask you guys to come off mute or feel free to put something into the chat. What values are reflected in your current compensation structure? And then if you want to share, are these values that you hold as an organization, or are they just kind of default?
So we're seeing market rate in the chat. Yeah, some more market rate. Cost of living is factored in for some folks. Yep, level of experience is coming up as well.
And for the people that answered that question, are those the values that you want to hold? Are those the most important ones? I'm especially going to push back on the market. Hell no. Thank you, Jamie. The market rate folks, and that is, Erika has a law degree from Harvard. I have no graduate degree at all. So that market rate, obviously, she probably in our market could make a lot more money than me. But I also want to say that we have absolutely no problem getting folks interested in working at the law center. Okay, we have hundreds of applications anytime we've had a job opening. People want to work here regardless of that market rate, particularly lawyers. So I would I'd encourage you to think about it if that's really but Erika's going to talk more about this in a minute.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about like benefits, other benefits that working at SELC offers that have nothing to do with salary. Thanks for sharing your guys' thoughts. Oh, I'm seeing something. Yeah, it makes me think about how narrow our definitions are based on the capitalist system we've all come up in. I think that's exactly what we were hoping to get you to think about. So now I'm going to talk a little bit, or actually a lot, about SELC's salary structure, because it's changed a lot over time. So we'll kind of go through the chronological progression. So as we were just talking about a little bit in the chat, conventional businesses and a lot of nonprofits, incomes are mostly determined by a market rate, but that privileges people of particular races, nationalities, genders, socioeconomic status, social connections, and access to higher education. So when the Law Center was founded in 2009, they wanted to challenge this idea that you have to pay people market rates or in relation to their quote unquote value under capitalism. So that's how they came up with this flat salary model. And under this model, everyone makes this exact same amount. Lawyers, non-lawyers, program staff, operations, admin staff. And this model worked really well for the Law Center, and it felt really good and liberatory at first. And it was really exciting to people. It was breaking down these false hierarchies of value that we don't really believe in and saying very clearly with our money that we're all equal. However, in the beginning, the staff at the Law Center was mostly pretty homogenous, white, young, and childless. And so their needs were pretty homogenous in that way too. And since that time, we've hired a lot more POC folks, parents, people with other financial responsibilities beyond their own personal needs. So that has kind of forced the conversation to evolve. So in this image on the screen, you can see the difference between equality and equity. And this was a big part of the conversation at this time. That the flat salary model is based in equality, but as our staff becomes more diverse, we needed to move into a more equitable salary model. So with that in mind, the Law Center kind of entered its next iteration of salary structure, which is the salary calculator. So this is a really complicated calculator. That's why we have this little cartoon here. It basically consists of a Google Forms survey where people can put in information about their life circumstances, and it feeds into an Excel spreadsheet that calculates out your thriving wage. And every year we update the calculator. So the base of it is the cost of living by county, which MIT has data on this that they update every year. And that cost of living amount constitutes kind of a fixed percentage of our total base salary. And then on top of that base salary, there's also additions for people who have dependents or or childcare. And so it definitely adapts over time. We originally chose that the cost of living would be 60% of our base salary, but as the cost of living has gone up, that became too expensive. So now it's 70% of our base salary. And then there's also some more slightly flexible pieces, like we have an option to reduce for people who want a smaller salary. So just like any
And
other
yes,
model,
people, I'm just going to interrupt. And yes, people do that, depending on their
yeah,
needs and other life circumstances, family support, things like that. I know if this is the first time you're hearing this kind of thing, you're like, right, anybody's going to choose to reduce. And but several people
they
do every
do.
year.
Yeah. So just like any other model, this one has pluses and minuses. So successes, we talked a little bit about, it's a lot more responsive to need than the flat salary model and allows for personal and political decisions to decrease your salary. The challenges, I would say one of the main challenges is that it's just really complicated and a lot of staff don't fully understand all of the math, which is not good because we really care about transparency and co-stewardship. So, we have everybody can see what everybody else's salary is in our organization, but not everybody understands exactly how those numbers got there, even when they look at the spreadsheet. Um, we also we make a lot of mistakes when we're implementing salaries. And sometimes we have to go back and say, sorry, we over or underpaid you. And now we have to deal with that because it's so complicated. And sometimes the policy is not clear. Like there's circumstances where you're like, well, what do I do? Do I qualify for childcare benefits while I'm on parental leave? Just like things like that we have to figure out on a case-by-case basis all the time. So a lot of these things just kind of come down to trust among staff and being able to kind of understand that we're all coming from a place of trying to do our best. Another challenge is some people disagree about like how much more than the living wage we should make. Should we be encouraging each other to save money for retirement, or is that bad because the investments are bad? Maybe both things can be true. Some variables are not accounted for in our calculator, like debt or inheritance. So it's never going to be like completely meeting people's actual needs, right? It's kind of an estimation. It's always going to miss nuances, but it does tend to create kind of this sense of false objectivity. That said, I think it does account for people's needs better than other models. And then it's also dependent on third-party research, which is the MIT Living Wage Calculator. So that can change drastically if they change their input sources and things like that. Okay, so that was the salary calculator was the second stage of our salaries. In the third stage, we added another component. So we kept the salary calculator, but we added this component of equitable merit-based compensation. And so this is $10,000 per year that people can opt into or opt out of, or opt in at half rate if they identify as someone who is deeply rooted in marginalized communities. So the language of the policy reads, we're offering our staff a one-time equitable merit-based adjustment for staff who are deeply rooted in BIPOC and low-income communities because we believe that their lived experience and cultural competency allows us to build stronger relationships with the frontline communities that drive our work. With this adjustment, we're hoping to address the systemic undervaluing of labor and people by lifting up the work of our staff members deeply rooted in historically disenfranchised communities. This language comes from our friends at Harmonize and is kind of meant to center BIPOC workers by focusing on their contributions and the benefit to the organization. And that kind of also reduces our legal risk as compared to other options that do similar things. So yeah, it's really focusing on the benefit to the organization brought by people who have these skills and experiences. And it enables us to distribute money to people who have been negatively impacted by systems of oppression. We have another training that's kind of about like the legal risk associated with this kind of thing. Is a little bit fuzzy, but we're doing it. Okay, and then the fourth thing that we just added is the Care and Support Fund. So this is just as of last year, and it's one fund for the organization. It offers $5,000 per person per year to access for emergency expenses. And so like in 2025, we used 15,000 of the 60,000 that we set aside, but it was just really great for everyone to have peace of mind knowing that in case the need arises, people can use this money. It's kind of based a little bit in mutual aid principles. So starting to wrap up this section, maintaining an equitable model of compensation is like tending to a garden. You have to watch out for yellowing leaves and root rot and adjust watering and other inputs accordingly. And some things require revisiting every year, like annual vegetables. And then it's also good to add good compost and other soil amendments by building trust and having kind of background conversations with your team about money, where you're not actually making the decisions, but just trying to kind of better understand each other's experiences and needs. We also want to mention that compensation doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's really good to consider other benefits as an important part of the compensation package that people care about, like having good health insurance coverage and time off policies, and Yeah, we have some radical benefits policies because of our radical governance practices. So these are some of the different things that we offer. And you can also read all of our policies on our website. I can share the link, but it's all public. I'll hand it back over to Sue. And then we'll get into questions pretty soon.
Thanks. Yeah, and I just want to note on that last slide about the liberatory HR, and these are the things I think do make the difference when we're not talking about maybe paying some for some roles under market rate. I took about a $10,000 pay cut when I came to the law center, but I was in love with the 30-hour work week because I have a teenager and a very busy life, lots of activist work that's unpaid activism, and the flexible work week. That's what keeps me here, and it was worth it to me to take that pay cut. Obviously, acknowledging my privilege as a person in a partnership with somebody else that works full time that allows me to do that. So these don't underestimate the value of these to certain kind of workers. And it also ensures that people are on your team. They're not just coming to work for your org because they want to make this big salary or a large salary. I doubt any of us are in comparison to anybody else, like offering huge salaries. But these can be so much more valuable to folks who actually want to be with you. So I like to say that. Not to mention the sabbatical. I'm about to come up on my second one. I'm very excited. And I'll probably spend some time in New Jersey while on it.
Wonderful. So there's a question actually about that in the chat.
Okay.
Can you share what your time off policies and sabbatical length is?
Yeah, Eric, you want to field that or you want me to?
I was gonna put our policies into the chat
Oh.
in a response, yeah. But
Great.
Great,
Terrific.
thank
So
you.
she put a link in there. I'll just say it quickly. We have all the federal holidays plus May Day and the day after the day of mourning, aka Thanksgiving, as our paid holidays. But our time off policy is also pretty rad in that we don't have a set limit. You have to justify it to your circles, your team, and we review each other's amount of time paid time off every year. So as long as we request it well in advance, make sure all our work's going to get done, and we're not putting too much pressure on the rest of our team. That's kind of the requirement. It's not a specific amount of time. Did that answer your question?
yeah, we also
Perfectly.
close the office for 4 weeks every year. Well, 2 of them are like undisturbed working time, so like no meetings and things, and then 2 of them are fully off. And it's kind of in line with each of the seasons. So we have like a spring break, and it just really helps with catching up on work or rest, and encouraging people to take PTO who might not take very much PTO.
Yeah, because we saw from studies in the corporate world that have these free time off policies that people actually took less time off. And that was true, not across the board, but for some folks that they actually took less time off than if we told them they had 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So this was to encourage that. And the advantage to that is you don't come back from your PTO to 400 messages, right? Because we're all taking that time off together. And the strict low communications is I'm not going to send you an email about, a random thing. I'm going to send you an email that's urgent, and that's all for that week. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about before we open it up a little more is sharing the work. So I talked about this a little bit, where everyone has both operations work and program work. So everybody's on either, I'm going to see if I can remember all the operations circle, Erika. Everyone either works in admin, finance, internal resilience, communications, grants. Did I get them all? I think that might be it. So
Did you
those,
say financial?
yeah, I did say finance. Those 5 circles are what we consider our operations circles, and that means that's what it takes to keep the organization going. And so anyone who has a job at the law center is required to steward the organization by being a member of the general circle, and that's a meeting once a month, and on a rotation be on the stewardship circle, which is a subset of the general circle. So we found that general circle was getting backed up, and so we decided that there were some org-wide decisions that didn't really need every voice, but needed representational voice. And then that you have at least one operations role. And so we've broken down our work into these very distinct bits where you can have an operations role that maybe doesn't even take an hour or 2 a week. Or it may be something cyclical, like helping with the audit, or something annually, like renewing our insurance policies. So stuff like that is distributed as well as we can, and that we have what we call co-filled roles, meaning if somebody wants to learn more about how we do payables, they can co-fill that payables role with me, and so they're not like just starting out from scratch, right? They're watching and learning. And then that provides a huge access to cross training. So nobody's out there on their own doing these operational roles without some guidance and help. Yeah. So I just wanted to share about that a little bit more. I saw one question in the chat about the hiring process, and I would say pretty it's pretty much like anybody's hiring process, in that we put a job description together, we think about the roles we need the person to fill. One of the biggest questions is, do we need another lawyer on staff that maybe has experience in a certain area of our work? Or is this purely a role that could be filled by a non-lawyer who might have some subject matter expertise or administrative skills? And so then we put that job description together. We imagine what main program circles that person would be working in, and the main administrative roles or operation circles we'd need them to be in, and base the job description on that. We usually have a hiring team, so it's usually representatives from those circles that the person would be hired into. And so we set up phone interviews just like anybody else would, and then maybe I'd usually say 2 in-person or Zoom meetings beforehand. We have people working all over the country, but we also love to bring more people into our Oakland office. So, it's kind of like that. I think did I miss anything important? Oh, anybody who wants to can come to an interview. So even if you're not on the hiring team, you can join the circle to learn about it. To learn about the person who is perhaps going to be hired. The interviewee, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. We also offer one of the programs that we do that's like our core work is our legal cafes. So we provide like 30-minute free consultations to groups that are interested in all different kinds of cooperative things, like maybe starting a worker co-op for this group, probably, I guess, talking about worker self-directed nonprofits and your particular needs. We also work with like housing organizations and um, labor laws and things like that. But yeah, feel free to sign up for one of our legal cafes if you need more personalized um, advice and think it would be helpful to talk to some of us about your organization.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder, Erica. And just to note that since most of you are in New Jersey, we wouldn't be actually giving you legal advice. We'd just be giving you some ideas about how to structure your organization and management, um, sharing our experience, strength, and hope.
So Sue and Erica, are we at a place where you want to move into Q&A in the last, 25 minutes or so that we have for our session today? Or are there more things that you want to cover before we do
Yeah,
that?
I think we'll open it up for questions and see what comes up.
Okay.
I noticed Jamie's in the chat. I'll go ahead and answer that while you collect some more, Casey. And also just feel free to raise your hand or come off mute to ask your questions. We like to have it, as we call these, the more of a conversation. But Jamie, yes, the Law Center has always had this structure, and that your question is a good one because. Um, so we do help orgs that want to transition from a more hierarchical structure into a more worker self-directed structure, and there can be unique challenges with it. But when our founder, Janelle Orsi, decided that she wanted to start an organization, her big realization was that she never wanted to be a boss or have a boss. And so she studied holacracy, sociocracy, native traditions that were collectively and kind of came up with what we call SELCocracy, right? So we adapted all she and her first couple of coworkers adapted those systems that to make them work specifically for the law center. And we don't sell a boilerplate or a template about how to do this because we don't think that's possible. We share our experience, we share concepts and ideas around how to do this, but everybody has to pretty much design it for the work that they're doing, the organization they have, and the people on board.
Thanks for that, Sue. There were a few questions earlier on in the presentation that I just want to make sure we circle back to. There was a couple around like what happens if there's an HR issue, if somebody isn't maybe pulling their weight, or if they're just sort of not panning out, is the same level of dedication given to feedback? How does the conflict stuff work in your organization? And Erika, I think that's going to you, because I think I heard you say something about being on the conflict management team at the beginning of this.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. I am on the conflict engagement team, so that's one of the structures that we have where people who have staff who have interpersonal issues with each other that they need help with can come to the conflict engagement team and for advice or just listening, or we also have like funds set aside for mediation if needed, if it rises to that level. I think some of the trickier situations that we've been facing some is when it's not necessarily like two staff have an issue with each other, but more of like an organization-wide issue that's creating interpersonal tensions. Like those are definitely hard to figure out how to deal with. We try to talk about it. I feel like one of our main learning edges is encouraging staff to be less conflict averse and building in practices so that we can actually talk about these things when they come up before they become bigger issues. So we worked with a contractor recently on restorative practices, and we're kind of learning about that framework and coming up with collective agreements so that, you know, if someone breaks one of our collective agreements, it's kind of easier to talk about it and hold them accountable by calling them in. We do have a termination policy, but we try really hard to not go to termination or like legalistic routes, and instead try to ask more of like, what does this person need in order to thrive in our organization?
Yeah, there are a bunch of lawyers that try not to use the law. It's kind of great. I would say around like supervisory issues. First of all, we all consider each other's supervisor. So we act in that way. For example, we all take the supervisor trainings when it comes to like sexual harassment prevention and all that, because we all kind of operate as supervisors. And the actual the way that that works is mostly at the circle level. So the circle is responsible for calling in folks that maybe are underperforming on tasks in a particular circle. And then we have twice a year peer review. So it's a self-review. I would fill it out, and two of my coworkers who would be my team throughout the year would be my my review team. And so we'll meet twice a year to review both what I said about myself and what they said about me. And then in between the twice a year, we have a 90-day where we're checking in on goals. So the goals that I set with my team would be reviewed by myself and maybe in another meeting with the team. And it's tough, like Erika said, just the same as conflict, because, you know, it's easy to give positive feedback. It's hard to give a little bit more critical feedback. But we push ourselves to because it's so crucial. But the thing about that is you don't get fired because you don't want to do a particular job anymore, right? So it's not like, you know, I don't know, I'm going to make something really wacky up. But if Erika said tomorrow, I never want to write another legal paper while I work at the law center, we would try to find a way to let her honor that, right? And so maybe she'd move into more like management consulting roles or more admin roles, and she wouldn't have to take on actual legal work. For myself, and I'll share this, when I came back from my first sabbatical, I said, you know what? I don't want to do these roles anymore. One of which was payroll. Erika was kind enough to take that role on, that task on. So that's the way we've made sure that the work is right for the people that are doing the work, and that we really we don't tie our job security to being able to fulfill one particular role. So I hope that answered that question about supervisors and accountability.
Yeah. I'll also share that a big part of our work is kind of like facilitation and figuring out how to have these conversations that we need to have with everybody. So I had a bunch of slides on this that are in like some longer presentations on compensation, but we didn't have time for it today. But here's like some of the tools that we use. Because it is hard and these things bring up feelings, but then having these conversations more regularly makes it kind of builds a culture where that's possible to do. So like one of the things that we do at our retreats is emergent space, and it's just anybody can pose a conversation that they want to have during that time. and then people who want to join can join and talk about it. Another one that we sometimes use is like one-on-one conversations. And I feel like this can be really helpful when you're trying to bring a policy proposal and someone has really strong feelings against it. So because, you know, in the moment with everybody, it's like you're not going to have time to actually talk to them and understand their feelings. But a lot of the times it's not really like people can kind of dig in their heels and say like, I really don't like this policy. But then if you take the time to actually talk to them, you find out there's something else that's kind of sticking there. And maybe it's not even really about the policy. So like an example here was about our childcare edition, and I talked to Christine afterwards, and she shared that she was going through an unrelated conflict with her neighbor where she felt she had been too trusting and it made her not want to be trusting in this work. But then when we talked through it, then she changed her mind. And she was like, oh yeah, I do want to be trusting. And I passed the proposal. Another one I think I mentioned, but it's important to have separate spaces for sharing feelings and experiences versus making decisions, especially when you're trying to do a really high stakes decision like changing your salary structure. Like have one meeting just to talk about your feelings and then have another meeting that's like not on the same day, maybe even not the same week, to make the decision so that people have time to process their feelings before they're voting on it. And here are some other like in the moment facilitation tips. So we say like, give me 5 fingers, like 1 to 5 of like how well do you understand? How activated are people feeling? Trying to identify needs and feelings underneath demands I talked about. Slowing down in your meetings is a really important one. Sometimes it's really can feel panicky, and just like freezing and breathing and not going too fast can help a lot, or suggesting that we make more time later for another conversation. Yeah, I won't go through all of these right now, but
I think the other thing that brought up for me, Erica, though, is that most of our meetings are conducted in a circle structure so that everyone's voice is in the room and that you have to actively pass, right? It's not that you have to raise your hand to get in. It's that we go around the room and it's like, okay, Jamie, what are your feelings about this? Marie, or what's your feedback or what's your question? Casey, what's your question? Maria, what's your question? Vicky, what's your questions? So that you have to say pass or I don't have any questions right now. You don't get, it's not just like whoever speaks or can raise their hand or jump in, which is tough for me. I come from a culture where we interrupt each other a lot, right? And I often have to be reminded of like, oop, not your turn. Like, so it's a active step away from participation rather than having to, get your voice heard. So I see Jamie's hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, in terms of like emergency services, like I'm curious if working in an emergency services situation would kind of change some of this stuff because sometimes like you have to make a decision like are we opening during the snowstorm or not? And when the stakes are it's higher stakes because okay, we're not going to feed people if we're not opening and some of these people are really need to eat something. So like things like that.
I mean, I guess I would say there's still a team of folks that that's going to affect, right? I mean, obviously the clients, but who's going to get to work at the in order to open it up, or who's going to, so the people most affected would be charged with that decision. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yes, no, that answered my question. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Maria?
I wanted to allow space for other folks, but I mean, I mentioned it in the beginning. I've been following SELC for such a long time, and I'm not surprised that you have countless people interested in coming to work for you because I love the way you honor the full self, not just the worker, but the full individual and their humanity in all the ways that you mentioned. I'm just curious because I definitely think about worker self-direction as an alternative to the hierarchical capitalist structures that we've all been sort of indoctrinated in. And a lot of us kind of struggle with thinking about how to break away from that because it's the only thing that we know. From the moment we step into the classroom and kind of like relinquish control to a person of authority to then transitioning into the workplace. So I'm just kind of curious, getting people to think about this alternative sometimes feels insurmountable. Can you tell me what you think are some of the cultural shifts that are necessary for a team moving into this kind of structure in order for that to happen? What are some of those shifts that are needed from the typical hierarchy to a more horizontal structure?
Yeah, we had a great book discussion with our compatriot Nilu, who ran an organization called Pangea Legal Services. She wrote a book called, oh, it just went out of my brain. Wait, I have it right here. Um, The Future is Collective. Oh, it's blurred. Anyway, I'll put it in the book in The Future is Collective: Effective Workplace Strategies for Building a Culture of Care. And it just came out. It's a new book. And Pangea, their route, reflected SELC's quite a bit. And one of the things that she really emphasizes that it has to be all in at the top, right? So Maria, as ED, your workers aren't probably going to revolt and make this happen. You're going to have to be invested. And oftentimes folks at the top do have to give up some power. And have to give, she said you had to be reminded that it wasn't just her decision to make, because Pangea went from an executive director structure to a code ED structure to all 24 people working at the organization as co-directors, right? And so I would say people at all levels have to be interested. And then Jamie, this may speak to your question a little bit too. Frontline staff have to be interested, right? Because often I've worked with orgs where the folks actually delivering services is like, this is not why I work here. I don't want to make decisions about where you move your office to, or I want to just, deliver this service, right? So it is about getting the right people involved, but there's got to be interest at all levels. It can't just be top down, we're going to do this, or bottom up, we're going to do this. And I think part of what we do invite people when we're hiring is folks that have some experience in collectivism, whether it's through a housing co-op in college or a worker co-op. Maybe you worked at the food co-op, and so you had some knowledge of collective activity somewhere else, which in most of our movement organizations, most of us have had somewhere along the way, right? Um, and but there has to be an intrinsic motivation to want to work this way. And so we also have over the years done a lot of political education, learned about worker co-ops around the world, and learned about why collectivism matters. Erika, what else would you say is important to support folks in doing this kind of work?
Yeah, I think the part that you mentioned about, the people at the top kind of being willing to give up power is obviously really important. And um, maybe something that people don't think about as much is, yeah, just like the people at the bottom having to step up and take more responsibility. Um, So I'm also thinking about like there's a lot of things where you don't like how the organization works, and you can be like, oh, like that's so annoying. My boss sucks. And in a worker self-directed organization, actually, no, if you don't like how it works, then now it's your responsibility to fix it. And that's like a lot of work. Um, but yeah, it has to kind of work that way. Um, that where everybody takes responsibility for the organization running smoothly and doing what it needs to be doing. So that's definitely, yeah, a big part of what we do.
Yeah, for sure. I often will tell a story like that. When I first started working at the law center, I'd had 35 years of working in regular organizations, where I had a boss, and I complained about something and expected my boss to fix it, and was confronted by my coworkers and be like, okay, then bring a proposal, when I was complaining about something. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, this is my job to fix it. So yeah, but how do we get somebody from, it's your job, boss, to fix this, to, oh, it's all of our jobs to fix that? It is through education and support.
That's great. Thank you, Sue and Erica. We've got just about 5 minutes left. So if anyone else has a kind of last burning question, please ask it. And while you're formulating that, I'm just going to ask a huge favor for everybody who's in the room today. I'm going to drop a link into the chat, which is a feedback form. It's really useful for us to hear what you think about being in these rooms, having these kinds of conversations, what you're looking forward to. Obviously, if you loved what you've heard today, I personally have loved a lot of what I've heard today. Please put that into the form, and we know, because then we can share that back with SELC, certainly. But it also helps us know, like, are you interested? Do you want to keep having these kinds of conversations? Do you want to go deeper? So think about that. Please just take a few minutes before you bounce off to your next thing to fill out that feedback form. And again, just going to open that floor one more time for, yes, thank you, Maria, our community engagement coordinator, saying, yes, we love your feedback. So is there another last burning question that anybody has right now? They want to make sure that they get to ask Erica and Sue today.
I mean, I have a question, but I'd rather someone else ask a question. But I will ask if no one is.
So we'll give it just another few seconds. See if anybody wants to come off mute or drop their question in the chat. I'm a facilitator, so I'm good with silence. Okay, Maria, go ahead. And if someone has one, make sure you raise your hand or drop it in the chat.
I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'm just curious, one of the things that I've been really interested in, and why I think about the importance of democracy in the workplace, is because, and I kind of was alluding to in terms of like cultural shifts, it's because of like thinking about the whole person, not just the worker. So I'm curious how you think this model strengthens democracy outside, beyond the workplace.
Lovely question. We've been thinking about this a lot within the worker self-directed nonprofit program here at the Law Center. And I think for me personally, it has made me take on the responsibility for making my voice heard in other spaces, my family, my friends, my community. And it's given me more comfort in doing that, and more skills, more tools, right? Like, I've introduced the circle structure to many other groups, um,
Yeah.
and really valuing that all voices get heard.
Thank you. Thanks, Sue. All right, well, we have 2 minutes left. I'm truly grateful to both you, Erica and Sue. This has been incredible. I know I have a lot of things that are just kind of like um, coming up for me, and things for us to consider as a team. I certainly try to adopt a lot of the practices in the way I approach my leadership role. And I think of ours as a collaborative team, but there's always work to do and more improvement. And I'm all for what you said about giving up power. I do think this is the way to really bring about equity and justice in not just our workplaces, but in our community. Shared power is the way to go. So thank you again, Sue. I hope to do this again with you, and I hope to I hope this was valuable for our community. There's lots of nonprofits that we work with, and sharing this information, I think, is one way to get people excited about horizontal decision making. So thank you again. Stay connected. Please, if you haven't joined our newsletter, please do so you get to know about all our incredible programming. Check out the SELC at theselc.org, right? I believe that's right. And we'll see you soon, hopefully. Thanks again, Erika and Sue. Take care, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon.